You are bleeding on my clean floor. I just buffed that marble. If you die here, I am going to be very annoyed because bloodstains are impossible to get out of porous stone. I don't care if you are the scariest man in Chicago. I don't care if you own this building. Right now, you are just a man ruining my shift. So we have two choices. I call an ambulance and you go to jail, or I use the super glue in my cart to fix you up, and you owe me a favor that will change my entire miserable life. Choose quickly because you're looking very pale. You are definitely going to want to see how this impossible arrangement unfolds, so make sure you are subscribed. Turn on notifications so you catch all my videos because the drama's only getting started. No cap. Comment let's go if you are ready for this journey. Alright, let's do this. The stain on the marble floor of the executive suite wasn't wine. Adanna knew the difference. Wine had a sugary, acidic tang that lingered in the back of the throat and attracted fruit flies if left too long. This was metallic. It smelled like copper and salt and something primal that made the hair on her arms stand up. It was blood. Adanna tightened her grip on the mop handle, her knuckles turning ashen against the dark wood. It was 2 in the morning in the Sky Point Tower in downtown Chicago. The city outside was a grid of electric gold and deep shadows, indifferent to the people working inside its glass cages. As a janitor, Adanna was invisible. She was a ghost in a blue jumpsuit who erased the sins of the wealthy before the sun rose. She cleaned up their spilled scotch, their shredded documents, and occasionally the lipstick stains left on collars that shouldn't have been there. She was supposed to be alone on the 45th floor. The silence of the office was usually her companion. It was the only time she could think without the crushing weight of her student loans, or the noise of her cramped apartment building pressing in on her. But tonight, the silence felt heavy. It felt like the air before a thunderstorm in Kampala, thick and charged with electricity. You missed a spot, a voice rasped from the shadows of the corner office. Adanna didn't scream. Growing up amidst political unrest had taught her that screaming usually attracted the wrong kind of attention. Screaming was for people who expected to be saved. Adanna knew better. Instead, she slowly lowered the mop into the bucket, the water sloshing softly, and turned toward the voice. Sitting in the high-backed leather chair, silhouetted against the glittering skyline, was a man. Even in the dark, the aura of danger radiating from him was palpable. It wasn't just the way he sat, slumped slightly to the left, but the sheer stillness of him. As he leaned forward into the sliver of moonlight cutting across the mahogany desk, Adanna recognized him, though they had never spoken. Ryu Min-jae, the CEO of the import firm that occupied the top 3 floors. The man the other cleaning staff whispered about in the break room. They called him the Dragon of the North. They said his family controlled the largest criminal syndicate in Seoul and had now wrapped its claws around Chicago's underworld. They said he didn't just fire people, he made them disappear. Right now, the dragon looked more like a wounded animal. He was clutching his side. Dark liquid seeped through his fingers, staining a white dress shirt that likely cost more than Adanna's yearly salary. His breathing was shallow, a wet, rattling sound that indicated a rib might be broken or a lung punctured. "Mr. Ryu," Adanna said, her voice steady despite the thudding of her heart against her ribs. "You're bleeding on my clean floor." He let out a short, pained laugh that turned into a wet cough. He winced, his face losing the little color it had left. "My apologies. I had a disagreement with a business partner. It seems negotiations broke down. You need a hospital," Adanna stated, taking a tentative step forward. The rational part of her brain was screaming to run, to call security, to leave the building and never come back. But her feet remained planted. "No hospitals," he wheezed, his eyes squeezing shut for a moment. "No police. If I go to a hospital, questions are asked, reports are filed. My enemies find me while I'm strapped to a bed." His eyes, sharp and predatory like a hawk's, snapped open and locked onto hers. They were dark, endless pools that seemed to assess her worth in a millisecond. "You have a first aid kit in that cart?" "I have antiseptic, bandages, and superglue," she said matter-of-factly. "It is for equipment repair and minor cuts. It is not for gunshot wounds. It will have to do." He shifted, a groan escaping his lips. "Fix me." Adanna hesitated. This wasn't her job. Her job was to clean, clock out, and go home to her empty studio apartment where a wedding invitation sat on the counter like a grenade waiting to go off. She thought about that invitation. Cream cardstock, gold lettering. Caleb and Jessica invite you to celebrate their love. The mockery of it burned in her stomach. But looking at him, a man who commanded fear, yet currently looked like a broken child, something in her softened. It was the vulnerability. It was the fact that for all his power and money, he was just as alone in this tower as she was. She pushed her cart forward, the wheels squeaking on the pristine floor. If you die, I'm not cleaning that up. I am serious. I will leave you for the morning shift. For the next 20 minutes, the office was silent save for the sound of tearing wrappers and Min-jae's sharp intakes of breath. Adanna worked with efficient, steady hands. She had learned basic first aid back home, helping her mother in the village clinic before she had come to America, with dreams that had slowly turned to dust. She cut away the ruined shirt, revealing a torso defined by lean muscle and marred by old scars. The fresh wound was a jagged slice across his ribs. It wasn't a bullet, but a knife wound. Deep, but clean. This is going to sting, she warned, uncapping the alcohol. Do it. She poured the liquid. Min-jae didn't scream. He hissed a curse in Korean, his hand gripping the edge of the desk so hard the wood groaned. His knuckles turned white, and sweat beaded on his forehead. But he didn't pull away. Adanna admired that. She admired pain tolerance. It showed discipline. She cleaned the gash, applied the butterfly bandages to pull the skin together, and then used the super glue to seal the edges. It was crude, but effective. You've done this before, he observed, his voice strained but stronger now. I grew up in Kampala, she replied without looking up, focusing on the seal. We made do with what we had. Is the job done? Almost. She taped a layer of gauze over the wound. There. You won't be playing tennis anytime soon, but you won't bleed to death tonight. She stepped back, wiping her hands on a rag. Min-jae touched the bandage tentatively. He took a deep breath, testing his range of motion. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. You are not American, he said. Ugandan, she corrected, tossing the bloody rags into a biohazard bag she kept for bathroom emergencies. Is there anything else, Mr. Ryu? Or may I finish my shift? He stood up. He was taller than he looked sitting down, looming over her even in his injured state. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek black wallet. You have steady hands. You didn't panic. Most people would have run or fainted. He opened the wallet. What do you want for your silence? 5,000? 10? A promotion to head of housekeeping? Adanna stopped mopping the blood residue from the floor. She looked at the cash he was already pulling out. It was crisp, clean. It could pay off her rent for the next 6 months. It could put a dent in her loans. But then her mind drifted back to the heavy cream, cardstock on her kitchen counter. Caleb, the man who had convinced her to leave her family and move to Chicago. The man she had supported while he got his finance degree, working 3 jobs until her hands were raw. And once he had gotten his job at the hedge fund, once he had started making money and meeting new people, he had looked at her one evening over a dinner she had cooked and told her it wasn't working. You're too much work, Adanna, he had said, swirling his expensive red wine. You don't fit my new image. I need someone with sophistication, someone who understands this world. 2 months later, he was engaged to Jessica, the boss's daughter. Jessica, who had never worked a day in her life. Jessica, who thought Africa was a country. In the invitation, it was a power move, a pity invite. He expected her to stay away, or worse, to show up alone, wearing something cheap, looking exactly like the charity case he had painted her to be. Adanna looked at Ryu Min-jae. Even with a blood-stained bandage and a ruined shirt, he was devastatingly handsome. He had a sharp jawline that looked like it could cut glass, cold eyes that held a universe of secrets, and hair that fell messily over his forehead in a way that made you want to brush it back. He radiated power. He radiated wealth. He was the kind of man Caleb wished he could be in his wildest dreams. I don't want money, Adanna said, her voice dropping an octave. She stood to her full height. She was tall, statuesque, with skin the color of deep obsidian that absorbed the moonlight. Min-jae raised an eyebrow, pausing with the cash in his hand. Then what? I need a date. Min-jae blinked. For a second, the mask of the Mafia Don slipped, revealing genuine confusion. A date? My ex-fiancé is getting married on Saturday at the Grand Estate in Lake Geneva. He thinks I'm nothing. He thinks I'm just the cleaning lady he discarded because I lacked sophistication. Adanna stepped closer, her eyes blazing, with a sudden, fierce pride that she had suppressed for years. I want to walk into that wedding with a man who makes him feel small. I want to look expensive. I want to look dangerous. I want him to look at me and realize he made the biggest mistake of his mediocre life. She pointed the mop handle at him like a scepter. And you are very dangerous. You are the most dangerous thing in this building. Min-jae stared at her. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. Then slowly, the corner of his mouth twitched. A slow, terrifying smirk spread across his face. It transformed him from a wounded animal back into the apex predator she knew he was. It was a smile that promised chaos. You saved the life of the head of the Gim Ryong syndicate, he murmured, stepping into her personal space. The scent of sandalwood, expensive cologne, and copper filled her nose. And you want to cash that favor in for a wedding date? Yes. He studied her face, searching for fear, for hesitation. He found none. Saturday, he said, his voice low and vibrating with amusement. Be ready at 8 in the morning. And Adanna? Yes. Burn the blue jumpsuit. You won't be needing it again. The apartment felt smaller than usual the next morning. Adanna paced the worn linoleum of her kitchen, the memory of the night before feeling like a fever dream. Had she really blackmailed a mafia boss into being her plus one? Had she really demanded a date instead of $10,000? Yes, she had. And for the first time in months, she didn't feel tired. She felt alive. At exactly 8 o'clock on Saturday, her phone buzzed. No caller ID, just a text. Downstairs. Adanna grabbed her purse. She was wearing jeans and a simple blouse. Unsure of what the protocol was for a mafia makeover, she walked out of her building, past the broken mailboxes and the flickering hallway light. Curbside, a car waited. It wasn't a taxi. It was a matte black phantom, sleek and silent like a shark patrolling deep water. The windows were tinted so dark they looked like mirrors. As she approached, the rear door swung open. A driver in a black suit nodded to her, but didn't speak. Adanna slid into the back seat. The interior smelled of leather and new money. Min-jae wasn't there. She was alone in the cavernous back seat, watching her neighborhood fade away as the car glided toward the wealthier district. She was taken to a penthouse suite in the city center. The elevator opened directly into a living room that was larger than her entire apartment building. Glass walls offered a panoramic view of Chicago, the lake shimmering in the distance. A team of people was waiting for her, 3 women and 1 man, all dressed in black, all holding various tools of the trade, brushes, garment bags, jewelry cases. Min-jae was standing by the window, speaking rapidly in Korean into a phone. He looked perfectly recovered, dressed in a casual but clearly expensive black turtleneck and slacks. When he saw her, he hung up without saying goodbye. You are on time, he said, turning to face her. I appreciate punctuality. You sent a car that cost more than my life, Adanna replied, crossing her arms. It would be rude to be late. He gestured to the team. Make her look like a queen. No, make her look like an empress who just conquered a nation. The next 3 hours were a blur. Adanna was poked, prodded, polished, and painted. They did things to her hair she didn't know were possible, weaving her braids into an intricate regal crown adorned with gold cuffs that caught the light with every turn of her head. They highlighted her skin until it glowed like burnished bronze. They painted her lips a deep, dangerous plum, but it was the dress that stole the breath from her lungs. It hung in the center of the room like a work of art, a deep emerald green silk gown. It was structured yet fluid, with a neckline that plunged dangerously low and a slit that reached her thigh. It looked like something a goddess would wear to start a war. Put it on, the stylist whispered reverently. When Adanna stepped out of the dressing room and looked in the floor-to-ceiling mirror, she gasped. The woman staring back wasn't the janitor who scrubbed toilets. She wasn't the immigrant girl who counted pennies at the grocery store. She was powerful. She was statuesque. The green silk clung to her curves like a second skin, contrasting beautifully with her dark skin. She heard footsteps behind her. Min-jae stopped in the doorway. He had changed. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him so perfectly it looked like it had been woven onto his body by spiders. He wasn't wearing a tie. The top buttons of his crisp white shirt were undone, revealing the faint, jagged edge of a tattoo on his chest and the smooth skin where she had glued him back together just nights ago. He stood there, silent. His eyes traveled from the crown of her head, down to her bare feet, then back up to her eyes. For a moment, the room felt devoid of air. "You look," he started, then paused, seeming to search for a word in English that fit. He shook his head. "You look like trouble. And you look like the cause of it," she breathed, turning to face him. He walked over, his movement predatory yet graceful. He was holding a small velvet box. He stopped inches from her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. "These belong to my mother," he said quietly, opening the box. Inside lay a pair of earrings, teardrops of emeralds surrounded by diamonds, suspended from gold chains. She was a woman who believed jewelry should be armor. She wore these when she had to face people who wanted to see her fail. Adanna's hands shook slightly as she reached for them. "Min-jae, this is too much. I just wanted to make Caleb jealous. I didn't ask to rob a museum. We do not do things halfway, Adanna." He took the earrings from the box. "May I?" She nodded, unable to speak. He moved closer, his fingers brushing the sensitive skin of her earlobe as he fastened the heavy gems. His touch was electric. It sent a jolt straight down her spine. "There," he murmured, stepping back to admire his work. "Today you are not a janitor. You're not Caleb's ex. You are the woman who captured the attention of Ryu Min-jae. You are my partner. And in my world, my partner is treated with reverence." He offered her his arm. His eyes were dark, unreadable pools of intensity. "Act like it." Adanna took a deep breath. She straightened her spine, lifting her chin. She thought of the mop bucket. She thought of the blue jumpsuit. And then she mentally set them on fire. She slipped her hand into the crook of his arm. "Let's go crash a wedding." The drive to Lake Geneva took 2 hours. The landscape shifted from the gray steel of the city to the lush, manicured greenery of the wealthy suburbs. For the first hour, silence reigned in the car. But it wasn't the awkward silence of strangers. It was the charged silence of two people sharing a secret. Two soldiers preparing for a different kind of battlefield. Min-jae broke the silence as they passed the "Welcome to Lake Geneva" sign. "Tell me about him." "The ex. I need to know my enemy if I am to destroy him properly." Adanna looked out the window, watching the expensive houses blur by. "Caleb. We met at university in Kampala. He was charming, ambitious. He had big dreams of America. We moved here together. I worked 3 jobs, cleaning offices, washing dishes, babysitting, so he could get his certification. I cooked his meals. I ironed his shirts. I listened to his speeches. And then he got a job at a hedge fund. He started wearing suits I couldn't afford. He started going to dinners where I didn't know which fork to use. He met Jessica." Adanna's voice hardened. "She's nice. In a vapid, shallow way. She laughs at everything he says. She doesn't challenge him. She makes him feel like a king without him having to earn the crown. When he left me, he told me I was holding him back. He said I was too rough, that I lacked polish." Min-jae scoffed, a harsh, guttural sound. "He is a fool. Sophistication is not about money or knowing which fork to use. It is about spine. You stitched up a a knife wound, without flinching. You bartered with a mafia boss. That is sophistication. That is power." He turned to her, his gaze intense, capturing hers. "Listen to me, Adanna. Tonight, we are not pretending. For the next 6 hours, you are mine, and I protect what is mine. If anyone looks at you with anything less than worship, they answer to me. Do you understand?" A shiver raced down Adanna's back. It was a performance, she told herself, just a role he was playing to repay a debt. But the heat in his eyes felt dangerously real. The way his hand covered hers on the leather seat felt possessive. "I understand," she whispered. "Good. Because we have arrived." The wedding venue was a sprawling estate right on the lake. White tents fluttered in the breeze, and the lawn was dotted with guests holding champagne flutes. It smelled of expensive perfume, cut grass, and desperation. As the black Phantom pulled up to the valet, heads turned. This crowd was used to Mercedes and BMWs. A Phantom was a statement. The driver opened the door. Min-jae stepped out first. He adjusted his cuffs, scanned the crowd with a look of bored disdain that immediately established him as the most important person in the zip code, and then extended a hand into the car. Adanna took it. When she stepped out, the emerald dress catching the sunlight, she felt the atmosphere shift. She saw the whispers start behind manicured hands. She saw the shock on familiar faces, people who had known her as Caleb's charity case girlfriend. Head up, Min-jae whispered against her ear, his hand firm and warm on the small of her back. Walk like the ground is honored to touch your feet. They moved through, the crowd like sharks parting a school of fish. Min-jae was magnetic. He greeted people he didn't know with a charm that bordered on arrogance. Who are you? A confused uncle asked as they grabbed drinks. Ryu Min-jae, he answered smoothly. Import, export. And this is Adanna. He didn't explain further. He let the mystery hang there. He let them wonder why a man who looked like he could buy the entire venue was with the woman Caleb had dumped. And then she saw him. Caleb stood near the champagne tower, looking stiff in a gray suit that was a shade too light for the season. He was laughing at something his bride Jessica was saying. Jessica looked pretty in a conventional, safe way. Lace, pearls, very bridal, very safe. But when Caleb looked up and saw Adanna, his laughter died. His hand jerked and his glass tilted, spilling champagne onto his sleeve. Adanna? He choked out, his eyes widening. Min-jae steered her directly toward them. The air crackled with tension. Adanna felt Min-jae's body heat next to hers, a solid wall of support. Caleb, Adanna said. Her voice was cool, smooth like river stones. She was shocked to find she didn't feel the urge to cry. She didn't feel the stinging shame she had expected. Looking at him now, sweating in his suit, terrified of the man beside her, he looked small. Caleb's eyes raked over her, confusion warring with regret. He looked at the emerald dress, the gold cuffs, the diamonds in her ears. You look incredible. I didn't think you'd come. I almost didn't, she smiled, a sharp, dangerous thing that she had learned from Min-jae in the car. But Min-jae insisted. He loves a good party. Caleb looked at Min-jae, shrinking slightly under the Korean man's cold assessment. Min-jae looked at Caleb like he was a bug he had found on his shoe. Something annoying, but ultimately insignificant. And who is this? Caleb asked, his voice wavering. Ryu Min-jae, he answered for himself, not extending a hand. I'm the man who realized what a colossal mistake you made. The insult landed with the weight of a physical blow. Caleb flushed a deep red. Jessica's smile faltered, her eyes darting between the three of them. Oh, well, we're glad you could make it, Jessica squeaked, trying to salvage the moment. We have you seated at table 19, in the back, near the kitchen entrance. Min-jae's eyes narrowed. That won't work. He snapped his fingers. It wasn't a loud sound, but it was authoritative. A venue manager materialized as if by magic, sensing the shift in power dynamics. Sir, my partner and I require a table at the front, Min-jae said smoothly, and a bottle of your 1998 Dom Perignon. Put it on my tab. Actually, bring 2 bottles. We are celebrating. But sir, the seating chart, the manager stammered. Min-jae just looked at him. He didn't threaten. He didn't yell. He just projected the absolute certainty that he would get what he wanted, or he would buy the building and fire everyone in it. Right away, sir. Table 2 is open. Min-jae didn't wait for an answer from the bride and groom. He guided Adanna away, leaving Caleb staring after them with his mouth open and champagne dripping down his wrist. As they walked toward the front, Adanna leaned into him. That, she whispered, squeezing Min-jae's arm, was satisfying. We are just getting started, he promised. They took their seats at the front. The ceremony began. Adanna sat in the front row, Min-jae's warm thigh pressed against hers. As the music swelled and Jessica walked down the aisle, Adanna watched Caleb. She watched him sweat. She watched his eyes dart toward her again and again. And as Caleb recited his vows, generic promises about love and patience and building a life together, Adanna realized something profound. She wasn't jealous. She wasn't heartbroken. She was bored. She looked at Min-jae. He wasn't watching the ceremony. He was scanning the perimeter of the garden. His eyes narrowed, his body tense. He wasn't watching the wedding. He was watching the exits. He was watching the tree line. He was a predator in a garden of sheep. "What is it?" she whispered, leaning close so her lips brushed his ear. "Nothing for you to worry about," he murmured, taking her hand and interlacing their fingers. His skin was rough against hers, warm and solid. His thumb rubbed circles on her palm, a gesture that felt startlingly intimate. "Just stay close to me." The reception was a blur of music and expensive food. Min-jae was attentive, peeling shrimp for her, refilling her glass, laughing at her jokes. He played the part of the devoted lover so perfectly that Adanna found herself forgetting it was an act. They danced, a slow, sultry waltz, where he pulled her body flush against his hand splayed across her back, his other hand holding hers against his chest. She could feel his heart beating, slow, steady, rhythmic. "You are a good dancer for a gangster," she teased, looking up at him, the lights of the tent reflected in his dark eyes. "And you are a good actress for a janitor." "I'm not acting right now," she admitted, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Min-jae's expression softened. The hard mask slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing the man beneath, the man who had bled on her floor and let her glue him back together. He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. "Neither am I," he whispered. The moment was electric. His lips parted, hovering inches from hers. Adanna's breath hitched. She wanted him to kiss her. She wanted him to kiss her right there in front of Caleb and everyone else, to claim her, to ruin her for anyone else. The moment was shattered by the sound of glass breaking. Not a dropped champagne flute, a window smashing. Min-jae's head snapped up. In an instant, the lover was gone, and the dragon was back. His muscles coiled, his eyes went cold. He spun Adanna around, shielding her body with his own, just as a pop, pop, pop sound echoed through the tent. Gunfire. Screams erupted. The wedding guests scrambled in panic, overturning tables, spilling wine and food. Men in dark ski masks were pouring through the garden entrance, weapons raised. "Get down!" Min-jae roared, shoving Adanna under the heavy oak table. "Min-jae," she screamed, grabbing at his pant leg. "Stay there, do not move." He reached into his tuxedo jacket and pulled out a gun. It was sleek, black, and terrifying. Adanna crouched under the tablecloth, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She watched through the gap in the cloth as chaos unraveled her perfect evening. She saw Caleb. He was cowering behind the cake table. He had grabbed Jessica by the shoulders and pulled her in front of him. He was using his new wife as a human shield. Adanna felt a surge of disgust so potent it nearly choked her. That was the man she had cried over, that coward, but Min-jae. Min-jae was a storm. He moved with terrifying precision. He didn't run, he advanced. He fired 2 shots, and 2 attackers dropped. He vaulted over a table, engaging a third man in hand-to-hand combat. Adanna watched as he disarmed the man with a bone-crunching twist of the arm before kicking him into a 4th attacker. It was brutal. It was bloody. It was the world she had cleaned up off the floor the night before, brought into the blinding light of day. But there were too many of them. "Adanna, move!" Min-jae was suddenly there, hauling her out from under the table. His suit was torn at the shoulder, his lip bleeding. His eyes were wild. "We have to go. They are here for me." "Who?" she gasped, stumbling in her heels as he dragged her toward the kitchen. "The Gyeum-ryong rivals. They tracked the car. I got careless." He kicked open the kitchen doors, startling the catering staff who were huddled in the corner. "Out the back," he commanded. They spilled out into the loading dock. The cool night air hit Adanna's flushed skin. But they weren't alone. A black van screeched to a halt, blocking their path. 3 men jumped out, weapons raised. Min-jae shoved Adanna behind a metal dumpster. "Stay down. I am not hiding while you get killed," Adanna yelled, looking around frantically. Min-jae stepped out, his gun raised. "You boys are a long way from Seoul." "The boss wants your head, Ryu," one of the men sneered, racking the slide of his pistol. Gunfire erupted again. Min-jae took cover behind a concrete pillar, returning fire. But he was pinned down. He checked his magazine. Empty. He looked back at Adanna, his eyes filled with a desperate apology. "Adanna, when I run, you go the other way. Do you understand?" "No." Adanna looked at the wall. There, mounted next to the loading bay door, was an industrial fire hose reel. She didn't think. She acted. She grabbed the nozzle. She cranked the valve wheel with all the strength developed from years of wringing heavy mops and scrubbing floors. The water pressure surged in the hose, fighting against her grip. "Hey!" she yelled at the top of her lungs. The hitman turned, confused by the woman in the emerald gown standing in the open. Adanna unleashed the stream. The high-pressure water hit the center gunman in the chest like a physical blow, knocking him off his feet and slamming him into the side of the van. The other two scrambled, slipping on the wet concrete. The distraction was all Min-jae needed. He surged forward, a blur of violence. He used the confusion to close the distance. He tackled the second man, disarming him, and using the weapon to pistol-whip the third. Within 10 seconds, the threat was neutralized. Breathing hard, Min-jae stood over the unconscious men. He wiped blood from his cheek and turned to Adanna. She was still clutching the hose, water dripping from the hem of her ruined emerald dress, her chest heaving. He looked at her with something like awe. He looked at her like she was a deity of war. "You," he panted, walking toward her, "are the most magnificent woman I have ever seen." "I ruined the dress," she said, her voice trembling as the adrenaline began to crash. "I will buy you 1,000 dresses. I will buy you the factory that makes the silk." He reached her, cupping her face with blood-stained hands. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Min-jae, you—" He kissed her. It wasn't gentle like the dance. It was fierce. It was desperate. It tasted of adrenaline and survival and blood. Adanna dropped the hose, the metal clanging against the concrete, and wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer. She buried her hands in his hair, anchoring herself to him. The chaos of the wedding, the gunfire, the danger, it all faded into the background. There was only him, only this man who fought for her, who put himself between her and the bullet. When they finally broke apart, sirens were wailing in the distance. "We have to go," Min-jae said, his thumb stroking her cheek, leaving a smear of red on her bronze skin. "But Adanna, this world, my world, it is ugly. It is dangerous. You saw that tonight?" "I saw you," she corrected, breathless. "I saw you protect me. I saw Caleb hide behind his wife. If you come with me now, there's no going back to the mop and bucket. You become a target. You become part of this." He looked deep into her eyes, offering her a final exit ramp. "You can run. You can tell the police I kidnapped you. You can go back to being invisible." Adanna looked at the loading dock. She looked at the unconscious hitman. She looked back toward the wedding venue where her old life, the life of being safe, of being discarded, of being invisible, lay in ruins. Then she looked at Min-jae, the monster, the savior, the man who looked at her like she was the only source of light in a dark universe. "I never liked cleaning up other people's messes anyway," she said softly. "Maybe it's time I made some of my own." Min-jae smiled, a genuine, blinding smile that reached his eyes and transformed his face. "Then let's go." He took her hand, and they ran into the night, leaving the sirens and the safety far behind them. The rain started falling as they sped away from the estate, heavy sheets of water that hammered against the roof of the stolen sedan. Min-jae had hot-wired 3 blocks from the venue. It wasn't the Phantom. It was a beat-up Honda with a rattling exhaust. But to Adanna, it felt like a chariot. She sat in the passenger seat, her knees drawn up to her chest, shivering slightly as the adrenaline began to bleed out of her system, leaving behind the cold reality of what she had just done. She had just assaulted 3 hitmen with a fire hose. She was fleeing the scene of a crime with a known Mafia boss. Her dress, the beautiful emerald silk that had cost a fortune, was ruined, stained with grease from the loading dock and soaked with water. Min-jae drove with one hand on the wheel, his eyes constantly flicking to the rearview mirror. He was tense, a coiled spring ready to snap. Every time headlights appeared behind them, his hand dropped to the gun resting in the center console. "We are not going back to the penthouse," he said, his voice rough. "It will be the first place they look. If the Gum Rayong know I am in Chicago, they know where I sleep." "Where are we going?" Adanna asked. Her voice sounded small in the dark car. "Somewhere safe, somewhere they won't look." They drove for an hour, leaving the wealthy suburbs far behind, bypassing the city center, and heading into the industrial outskirts, where the factories rusted under the orange glow of streetlights. Min-jae pulled into the parking lot of a motel that looked like it rented rooms by the hour. The neon sign buzzed ominously, the letter M flickering on and off. "This is the safe house?" Adanna asked, looking at the peeling paint on the doors. "It is safe because it is invisible," Min-jae replied. "He killed the engine. Stay here." He went into the office. Through the rain-streaked window, Adanna watched him. He still moved with that lethal grace, even in a torn tuxedo. He slapped cash on the counter, no credit cards, no paper trail, and came back with a key. Room 12. Around the back. The room smelled of stale cigarette smoke and cheap lemon cleaner, a scent that ironically reminded Adanna of her job. But she wasn't a janitor tonight. She was a fugitive. Min-jae locked the door, engaged the deadbolt, and then propped a chair under the handle. Only then did he exhale. He turned to her. The harsh fluorescent light of the bathroom spilled out, illuminating them. He looked wrecked. His hair was plastered to his forehead, his lip was swollen, and blood was seeping through his shirt again. "You are bleeding," Adanna said, the instinct to care for him overriding her fear. "I popped a stitch. It happens." He leaned against the dresser, looking at her. He didn't look at her like a boss looking at an employee. He looked at her like a man looking at a miracle. "You should call your family. Tell them you are safe, but do not tell them where you are. My family is in Uganda, Min-jae. And I have no one here. You know that." "Right." He ran a hand down his face. "I need to get you out of the city. I have a plane that can take you to—" "Stop." Adanna stepped forward. Her bare feet sank into the scratchy carpet. "Stop trying to send me away." "You don't understand, Adanna. Tonight was just a skirmish, a warning. War is coming. These men, they don't stop. They will burn this city down to get to me. I cannot guarantee your safety if you stay with me." "I didn't ask for a guarantee," she said firmly. "I asked for a date. And honestly, the date was terrible. The food was cold, the groom was an idiot, and people started shooting before dessert." Min-jae stared at her, and then a laugh bubbled up from his chest. It was a genuine sound, rusty and surprised. "You are unbelievable. I am practical." Adanna walked over to him. She reached out and began to undo the buttons of his shirt. "Sit down. I need to fix you up again. And this time, I don't have super glue, so you are going to have to hold still." He sat on the edge of the bed, watching her as she moved into the bathroom. She came back with a wet towel and the small first aid kit he had grabbed from the car's glove box. It wasn't much, but it was enough. As she cleaned the wound on his side, the silence between them shifted. It wasn't charged with danger anymore. It was charged with intimacy. She touched his skin with reverence, tracing the old scars that mapped his violent history. "Where did you get this one?" she asked, touching a jagged line on his shoulder. "Seoul. 3 years ago, a negotiation gone wrong. And this one? A circular burn on his forearm. My father. A lesson about loyalty." Adanna paused, her hand hovering over the mark. "He burned you?" He was a hard man. He believed that pain was the only teacher that students didn't ignore. Min-jae looked at his own arm as if it belonged to a stranger. "He taught me how to be a king. He didn't teach me how to be a man." "You are a man," Adanna said softly. "A man who saved me tonight. A man who bought me emeralds because he wanted me to feel like a queen." She finished bandaging him. When she looked up, he was watching her with an intensity that made her knees weak. "Why did you use the hose?" he asked. "You could have run. You could have hidden." "Because," Adanna said, sitting back on her heels between his legs, "I spent 5 years supporting a man who wouldn't have crossed the street to help me. I spent 5 years making myself small so he could feel big. Tonight, when I saw you fighting, when I saw you outnumbered, I realized I am done being the woman who waits in the car." She reached up and touched his bruised cheek. "If you are going to war, Min-jae, I am not staying behind." Min-jae closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. He let out a shuddering breath. "You have no idea what you are asking for. It is not romantic. It is ugly. It is waking up at 3 in the morning checking the locks. It is looking for wiretaps in your phone. It is wondering if the car will explode when you turn the key." "I know," she whispered. "But I also know that for the first time in my life, I feel seen. I feel awake. And I would rather live 1 year awake with you than 50 years asleep with anyone else." Min-jae opened his eyes. They were dark, dilated, and filled with a raw hunger that had nothing to do with food. "Then I am yours," he vowed. He leaned down and kissed her. This time, there was no audience. There was no gunfire. There was just the hum of the vending machine outside and the rain on the roof. He kissed her slowly, worshipfully, tasting the night on her skin. He pulled her up onto the bed, tangling his hands in the complex braids of her hair, pulling the gold cuffs free until her hair cascaded around them like a halo. That night in the cheap motel, amidst the smell of smoke and rain, the janitor and the Mafia boss didn't just sleep together. They forged a treaty. They dismantled the walls they had built around their hearts and built a fortress around each other instead. The next morning, the sun rose gray and bleak over the industrial park. Min-jae was already up when Adanna woke. He was standing by the window, peering through the blinds. He had found a fresh shirt somewhere, probably stolen or bought off a truck driver, and he had cleaned his gun. "We move in 10 minutes, he said without turning around. "I have made a call. My lieutenants are securing the penthouse. The threat has been contained." "Contained?" Adanna asked, sitting up and pulling the sheet around her. "The men who attacked us will not be attacking anyone ever again. And a message has been sent to their boss in Seoul. If he sends more, I will send them back in pieces." He turned to look at her. His face was hard, the mask back in place. But when he saw her sleepy, disheveled form, the mask cracked. "There are clothes for you in the bag on the chair," he said softly. "Jeans, a sweater, boots. Not exactly silk, but warm." "Thank you." Adanna dressed quickly. When she was ready, Min-jae held out his hand. "Ready to go back to the tower?" "Ready." But they didn't go back to the way things were. The blue jumpsuit was gone, burned metaphorically and literally. The next 6 months were a metamorphosis. Adanna didn't just enter Min-jae's world, she studied it. She didn't want to be a trophy on his arm. She wanted to be useful. She wanted to be indispensable. Min-jae tried to resist at first, trying to keep her in the gilded cage of the penthouse, showering her with gifts, and trying to shield her from the business. But Adanna was stubborn. She started coming to the office. Not to clean, but to listen. She sat in the corner during meetings, silent as a statue, observing. She watched how Min-jae negotiated. She watched how he used silence as a weapon. She watched how he detected lies. And she learned. One afternoon, 3 months in, Min-jae was in a heated dispute with a shipping conglomerate from East Africa. The negotiations were stalling. The translators were doing a poor job, missing the nuance of the cultural insults being thrown across the table. Min-jae was getting frustrated. His temper, usually ice cold, was heating up. He was about to walk away from the deal. That is when Adanna stood up. She walked to the head of the table. She was wearing a tailored black suit that sharpened her silhouette. She looked at the Ugandan delegation and spoke. She didn't speak English. She spoke Luganda, the language of her home. The delegates froze. They looked at this woman, who they had assumed was just a silent ornament, speaking their dialect with the flawless accent of a native. She spoke firmly, correcting their assumption that the Koreans were weak, translating Min-jae's offer not just literally but culturally, framing it in a way that appealed to their sense of honor and hierarchy. She turned to Min-jae. "They are worried about the security of the route through Mombasa. They think you cannot guarantee protection against the local cartels. Tell them about the agreement you have with the port authority." Min-jae looked at her, stunned. Then a slow smile spread across his face. He told her. She translated. The deal was signed 20 minutes later. When the room cleared, Min-jae sat on the edge of the table and pulled Adanna between his legs. "You speak Luganda?" "I speak 4 languages, Min-jae. You never asked." "I am an idiot," he murmured, kissing her throat. "You are not just my partner. You are my weapon." From that day on, Adanna was no longer a shadow. She was the queen of the tower. She handled logistics. She handled personnel. When whispers started among the men, sexist, racist whispers about why the boss was keeping the help around, Adanna didn't run to Min-jae. She walked into the break room where the loudest dissenter, a man named Kang, was holding court. She walked up to him, poured herself a coffee, and then calmly listed the exact coordinates of his mother's house in Seoul, the name of his secret mistress in Chicago, and the amount of money he had been skimming off the top of the casino shipments. She didn't fire him. She told him that from now on, his debt belonged to her. Kang turned pale. He bowed to her, deeply. When Min-jae heard about it, he laughed until he cried. He bought her a desk. He put it right next to his. But the past has a way of knocking on the door just when you think you have sealed it shut. 6 months after the wedding, on a Tuesday evening, Adanna was going through the mail that had been forwarded to the firm. Most of it was bills or business correspondence. But one envelope stood out. It was cream cardstock, cheaply made, trying to look expensive. She recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from Caleb. Adanna sat in her leather chair, tapping the envelope against her chin. Min-jae was on a call, looking out at the city lights. He sensed her shift in mood and hung up. "What is it?" he asked. "Fan mail," she replied dryly. She opened it. "Dear Adanna, I hope this letter finds you well. I've been trying to reach you, but your number has changed. I saw you in the business section of the Tribune last week. You look different. Things have been hard. The annulment was messy. Jessica's father blacklisted me from the finance firms in the city. He didn't like how I handled things at the wedding. It's unfair, really. I was under duress. I was thinking about you, about us. We made a good team, didn't we? You always had a head for numbers. I was wondering if maybe we could get coffee. I'm looking for new opportunities, and I know your current partner has connections. I miss your cooking. Best, Caleb." Adanna read the letter twice. The audacity was breathtaking. He wasn't apologizing. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was asking for a job. He was asking for a handout. He missed her cooking. Min-jae walked over and plucked the letter from her fingers. He read it quickly. His face remained impassive, but his eyes grew cold. "Shall I have him removed?" Min-jae asked. "Not killed, just relocated. To Alaska, or perhaps a small island with no internet." Adanna laughed. It was a light, airy sound. She took the letter back. "No," she said. "That would require effort. That would imply he matters." She stood up and walked over to the shredder in the corner of the office. She fed the cream paper into the machine. The grinding noise was the only sound in the room as Caleb's desperate plea was turned into confetti. "He is not worth a bullet, Min-jae. He's barely worth the electricity it took to shred this." Min-jae watched her, a look of profound respect on his face. He walked over to his desk and picked up a small black velvet box. He had been carrying it around for weeks, waiting for the right moment, waiting for the last ghost of her past to be exorcised. "Adanna," he said. She turned. He wasn't kneeling. Ryu Min-jae did not kneel. But he looked vulnerable in a way that was far more powerful. He looked open. "We never stayed for the vows," he said softly. "At the wedding." "I heard enough of them," she replied, leaning against the shredder. Sickness and health, richer or poorer. It all sounded like a contract they didn't intend to keep. Min-jae stepped closer. He opened the box. Inside sat a ring. It wasn't a traditional diamond. It was a black diamond, dark and deep and beautiful, set in a band of twisted platinum that looked like vines, or perhaps scars. It was resilient. It was unique. It was her. "I have different vows," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. Adanna's breath hitched. "I vow to kill for you," he said, his eyes locking onto hers. "I vow to burn the world down if it tries to touch you. I vow that you will never be invisible again. I vow to be the monster in the dark so you can walk in the light, and I vow to let you be the monster when you need to be." He took her hand. His fingers were warm, calloused, familiar. "I do not promise peace, Adanna. I promise a storm. But I promise I will hold the umbrella." Adanna looked at the ring. Then she looked at the man who had bled on her floor, the man who had given her a voice. "And I vow," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "to patch you up when you bleed. I vow to remind you that you are a man, not just a king. And I vow to never, ever let you fight alone." She held out her hand. Min-jae slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "Deal?" he asked, echoing the words from the first night. "Deal," she whispered. He pulled her into a kiss that tasted of victory. It was a kiss that sealed a pact, written in blood and ambition. Outside, the Chicago skyline glittered, a kingdom of glass and steel. But inside the office, the real power resided. Adanna looked over Min-jae's shoulder at the clean marble floor where they had met. There was no blood there now, only the reflection of two people who had found love in the wreckage of their lives. She had agreed to be a date. She had agreed to a transaction, but she stayed for the vows, the kind that weren't spoken in front of a priest, but whispered over the barrel of a gun and sealed with a promise of forever. And as Min-jae held her, Adanna smiled. The mop bucket was gone. The blue jumpsuit was gone. Long live the queen. And that is the end of Adanna and Min-jae's story. From the janitor's closet to the executive suite, they proved that sometimes the best love stories start with a little bit of blood and a whole lot of attitude. If you love this story, smash that like button and subscribe for more tales of romance, danger, and revenge. Let me know in the comments if you would have used the fire hose or if you would have run. I know what I would have done. Until next time.